I don't need to earn your respect. And our guest today, Mike Domitrz, is going to explain what that means. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thanks for having me on here, Susan. I appreciate it. That phrase is so powerful because what'll happen is people in positions of leadership will say, well, they have to earn my respect. Well, that's interesting because that becomes a power play. So I have to do something for you to respect me versus you respecting me because I'm a human being.
Yeah.
The problem with that whole approach is, hey, Susan, you have to earn my respect is, well, let's say you earn it. But that also means now that you have to earn the next person's respect above me. And it's a power game. Who gets to decide whether you're respected or not? Should never be a power game, ever. It shouldn't have to do anything with hierarchy or seniority or experience. You give respect to all human beings. Now, they can earn your admiration. They can earn a title, a promotion. They can earn all those things. But when it comes to respect, we give it to human beings because that's what we do. We treat each other with dignity and respect at all times.
You know, something that I thought of as you were describing that, Mike, also is, what about self-respect? When we have self-respect and we have the confidence and the courage within ourselves to know who we are, how does that play into earning or giving someone respect?
Yeah, it's a great question. So here at the Center for Respect, when we're working with organizations, this is something they'll go down into. They'll say, hey, what about, shouldn't they have to have their own self-respect? No, I can treat you, Susan, with respect, whether you have it for yourself or not.
I love that.
And that's what's beautiful about this. That means I don't treat you less than because of an area of your life you're struggling with. I don't treat you less than because of that. I still treat you with dignity and respect because you're a human being. So yes, I want you to have self-respect. I want to do everything I can to empower you to discover that for yourself. That will not impact how I treat you as far as treating you with respect, though.
Yeah, I love that, because here on Messengers on a Mission, we know that it's what we do in the world, what lights us up, what keeps us getting up in the morning with a smile on our face and wanting to tackle the day, is because we're serving people. We're making a difference. We're being that pebble in the pond. And I love that you were going into organizations and kind of like creating the groundswell for everyone to understand what respect means. What is one of the biggest issues that you see when you're going into an organization where this crops up? Is it at the C-suite level? Is it at the mid-level manager level? Is it at the loading dock employee level? Where do you see it showing up the most?
Well, it definitely shows up everywhere. The most concerning area is at the top, because if it's at the top, it's going to be tolerated at every level below because they're going to go, well, they're doing it. Why can't I do it? Yeah. You'll commonly see this also in star performers. So you have a great salesperson who's rocking it, but doesn't follow the rules, does not follow the company's or organization's values. And they say, well, we can't get rid of them. They're a star. Oh, so your value wasn't an actual value. It was just a lie you threw out there to make people feel good about your organization. Because if it was a value, you would respect the value and tell the person, you are not bigger than the organization. And if that's our core value, we're going to have to let you go, because you're not living according to the core value we agreed to bring you on board based on. And so that's what it means when we truly respect each other. It shows up at every level equally, that I can also bring up problems no matter how high above in rank you are of me. So this is really important, Susan, because people say, well, I've always told people I have an open door. Okay, how often does it get used? Well, nobody ever seems to come in. Oh, well, then something, just saying you have an open door doesn't show how much you're willing to address people's concerns.
Yeah.
I don't need you to come into my open door to say it looks like something's bothering you. What would you like to share? Yeah. In the middle of a meeting, I don't need to wait for you to come to my open door for me to instead say, I'm afraid I might have said something triggering to you, John or Julie. What might that have been? Because I want to learn from that. So that they see me publicly create an open door, not just a true open door to an office. So that's what we want to do. We want to say, how am I looking to discover the ways that I might not be leading with respect, and own it and really open the conversations.
Yeah, and there's in the situations that you're describing there, it's also showing the authentic human being, not the robot behind the desk with the door open. It's really connecting at a heart level with human beings.
Yes.
I read a blog post that you have on your website that says leading and living with love. And it's really, really a beautiful essay. But it starts with love is the source and foundation of my spirituality. Love is what connects us. Love is what bonds us. Love runs through all living matter like a microcelium. Is that what the word? Or
Mycelium.
energy?
Mycelium.
Thank you.
Yes.
A fuel to our souls. But when I read that, I was like, yes, because if you're leading with love, if you're leading with a heart where you're connecting one human being to another human being, you're going to be doing that conversation like, I'm sorry, did I trigger you? Would you like to talk about it? My door is open. Come sit down. Let's have a conversation. That's what we do when we're leading with love.
Yes, we're not trying to be right. We're trying to be curious. And the difference is dramatic. If I'm ever leading by trying to be right, I'm going to bulldoze, because it doesn't matter what you think as long as I'm right. It doesn't matter what you feel as long as I'm right. Versus leading with curiosity, which means I might discover things I could do better, because I'm being curious to better understand how I connect with you, to better understand you, how you connect with the world. And so it's a learning and discovery process versus an assumption.
A willingness. Yeah, it's a willingness to learn.
Yes.
Even if you're at the top of the chain, you're willing to learn. And you're right. When that gets set at the highest level and other people and that person holds the people below them accountable to that way of interacting with people, then you're right down to the loading dock. People are going to respect each other.
Yeah, I'll give you a classic example of how this shows up in the world. So I work with everything from corporate boardrooms to dealing with sexual respect and consent in middle schools, high schools, and universities, and a lot in the US military. And so when I'm in the US military, it's possible that somebody could bring me in to a room full of people in their 40s and 50s. That does happen, even though the average age is very young. That does happen. And people go, we don't need to be here. We're married. This stuff doesn't apply to us anymore. So right away, they have an assumption forward. We are right. We don't need this. And I stop and I go, okay, great. So let me understand, how many of you are parents? And a ton of them raise their hands. How many of you have talked to your kids about consent? And they'll say, now less hands come up, but a few hands come up. And I go, okay, great. What did you teach them? Well, no means no and yes means yes. Okay, so you didn't teach them how to ask the question that leads to the yes or no? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, where are they going to get the chance to say yes or no if nobody ever gives them a choice? And they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. So what we have to do is open doors to where they haven't recognized yet they're lacking information that it's really going to help them move forward. So, okay, great. That's your kid. Let's go to your spouse. When's the last time you sat down with your spouse and said, what do you really love that we do in bed together? And what do you wish we didn't? What doesn't rock your world? Now the numbers drop dramatically. And people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. Who has those conversations? Well, I thought you told me you have this all down, this whole idea of consent. Consent means mutually wanted. If you're not having any conversations with your partner about what they mutually want, you don't really understand consent. You just think it's a yes or a no versus do they want this or not? And that's what we're talking about, helping people open doors that help them recognize, hey, I need to be a little more curious than I am currently on whatever the topic is, whether it's respect in the workplace, in the home, or sexually. But am I willing to be curious to learn something I never even thought of before?
Yeah. You know what I thought of whenever you mentioned you walk into a room and they're in their 40s and their 50s and they're closed down. They're like, we don't need this. And what came to my mind is the whole Me Too thing. And not that we're going to spend the rest of our time together talking about that, but they have women working for them. If there were 40 or 50-year-old women in the room, they've got young men working for them. So it happens in the workplace, just like we're talking about earlier with the respect situation. It is that combination of consent and respect in all walks of life, whether it's work or personal.
Yeah, what I explain to people is that when we talk about the Me Too movement, it wasn't so much a movement as it was a reflection of history. What was happening is we were finding out about what's already been happening for the longest time. It was a reflection of history. And so it wasn't something new. It was the new was we were discussing it for the first time, what had been happening forever. That's what the difference was there. So now how do we have these conversations now so we create a new history going forward where we don't have to look back on that happening as much, right? We might not eliminate it completely, but we can eliminate it dramatically.
Yeah, and because we haven't been an open, I grew up in the 50s and we didn't have these, conversations. And if we felt uncomfortable about something, we just bucked up and dealt with it. We didn't speak up and say anything. And so all these things that happened over the years for women that led to the Me Too, it was also because they didn't feel they could open up or that they could say something or they could have the conversation, which is really what we're talking about here is if there is the environment where people can have conversations, those things don't happen anymore.
Yeah, it makes such a huge difference, Susan. So I was in front of an audience, this was several years ago, and older gentleman in the room raises his hand and I say, yes. And he goes, with all due respect, Mike, are you actually saying I need to ask my wife before we do something sexually? And I said, and he said, my wife of over 20 years. And I said, well, with all due respect, is it you don't think your wife deserves a choice or you just won't give her one? And the whole room was like, oh, mic drop moment, right? And so people always ask me, what did he do? What did he do? And this was a high person in a high level position in the organization. And he looked at me and said, touche. Because he opened with all due respect, which was a bit of I'm about to take a stab here, right? I mean, that as soon as that comes. And so I used his same language. I was honoring his language, right? But he realized how foolish it sounded after he said it out loud. Mm-hmm. So I've never given my wife a choice in the last 20 years, and I'm taking pride in this. That's what he recognized when he heard me say back, it's that you won't give her a choice or she doesn't deserve one. Right? That helped him realize, whoa, that is messed up. Right? Now, I'm not trying to shame him or guilt him. What I want him to do is go home and start giving a choice. Right? And that was the beautiful part. By him saying touche, it was not a personal shot at him. It was a discovery for him to go, yeah, I don't want to be that guy. Right? So touche, good for calling that out. I want to do better going forward.
Wouldn't it have been a fun thing to be a fly on the wall when he went home at the end of the day and had a conversation with his wife, which I hope he did have, to say, you're never going to believe what happened today.
All right. So here's the cool part. I've met the spouse the next day in these stories sometimes.
Wow.
That's the amazing part. So I'm at a location for 2 days in a row. This has happened more than once in my career. And I do the program one day, and the next day, I don't know it, a spouse of somebody from the day before is in the audience. Right? And afterwards, they come up and they talk to me. So this actually happened in an installation. I'm in the middle of speaking this was happening in a military audience, speaking to a crowd, and I'm talking about asking first. And we're towards the end of the program. The group is fantastic. The energy's off the charts. They're agreeing they should be asking. They're learning how. They're loving it. A woman raises her hand towards the end and says, I have to share something. I say, sure. She said, my husband came home yesterday. And he, in front of my teenage daughter, looked at me in the eyes and said, honey, may I give you a kiss? And I turned around in front of my teenage daughter and said, what are you doing asking? You don't need to ask me. You just do what you want to do.
Wow.
She goes, now I recognize the message that I sent my daughter in that moment was horrible. I should have said, well, thank you, honey, for asking and giving me that choice, because that's what I want my daughter to always have, a choice. Why wouldn't I want a choice? And then she says this, now I recognize he must have been in your program yesterday because he said he went to a training. Now, the funny part was it was technically at a different location, but I was at that location the day before. So it was me. So he went home, exercised it. She at first didn't learn the lesson because she wasn't in the session. Then she learns it and realizes, I want that for my kid. I want that for me. I want that for my spouse. So we get to hear stories like that.
Yeah. And this is new information. Again, these
Yeah.
conversations were not encouraged when I was growing up. I did several years with AT&T, even though I was an entrepreneur, and I always thought what I aspired to was the C-suite type of thing. And then I got there and it was like, I felt like my wings had been clipped because I just don't do well in a corporate environment, but I was there for a few years and I didn't see what we're talking about right here today. I didn't see a culture where we had an open door to be able to discuss whatever was going on. It was very boxed. You say this, you do that, you're a robot, go do what you were supposed to do. So both the husband and the wife and the example that you were sharing, they're products of the culture that they grew up in. So this is like new learning, the curiosity that you're bringing up for people to be curious to learn that, wow, just because we've lived a certain way or done things a certain way our whole lives, that doesn't mean it's the best way. And can we do better?
Exactly. And Susan, you brought up something really important for everybody to think about. Not only was it not discussed, it was shamed for being discussed. So if somebody at that time came forward to a company and said, I don't feel like I'm being respected for this reason, they would have been laughed out of the room.
Absolutely.
For not being tough enough, for being too weak, for all these, and all they're doing is calling out disrespect. And they would have been laughed out of the room. So there's a ton of shame that came through generations of, I'm not supposed to talk about this. The gentleman who said, I've never asked my wife. And he said, well, later in that conversation, he would say, well, she's never complained. And I said, well, have you ever gave her the chance to give feedback? And he was like, no. Well, what are the odds she's going to talk about a topic where maybe the way she was raised, you don't talk about that based on gender, or that means something negative about you if you're sexually, progressive and having conversations. So she's not going to talk about it because of all that stigma. You don't give an opportunity for her to talk about it. So you think you're getting no complaints when what you really have is an environment where people don't feel safe to talk at all. Exactly. So of course you don't get complaints.
Exactly. Mike, how did you ever get into this work?
Well, you certainly don't grow up when I did. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. You don't grow up thinking that's what I'm going to do, because this was not a topic people even talked about. You didn't hear about it in the news. So that wasn't my plan. And I was away at college studying. And there was a note at my door when I came back from practice one day. And the note said, Mike, call home immediately. And I'm like, oh man, somebody must have died. That's what went through my mind. So I called home. My mom answers. My mom asks if I'm sitting down. Now for sure, you're thinking, all right, who's died? And my mom tells me that one of my sisters has been raped. And my world would change in that moment. I would, one, become angry, enraged. I would become confused, lost, hurt, all these feelings all at once. And what would happen is the person would get caught. There would be a trial. I would start to learn about this topic because of that trial. And I became more and more upset around the topic. And then I heard a speaker talk about it that I was required to go to as a college athlete. We all had to go. And I thought, wait a second, I can do something about this. And that was around 1990. And then so I started speaking out in 1990, 91. So it's hard to believe it's been over 30 years now.
Wow.
Doing this work. So I started as an angry brother, really as an angry brother, and realized, well, anger is not connecting with people or uniting people to make a difference. And so I decided, how can I be interactive? How can I engage people where they're at, to give them the skills they need to want to do the right thing, not just to raise awareness, but to want to do the right thing. And that's when everything shifted. Those first 3 years of me doing this work, that shift happened. And then we saw a huge difference in how people wanted this. They're like, can you please tell us more?
Yeah. And you bring up also the context of you being an athlete, and then you just come back from a practice. And we all know the stories that have been in the news for years and years of things that happen with athletes, and the pressure and the lack of consent that's given, and the lack of respect that has shown to the females that are around the athletes. And so do you go into organizations specifically around in athletic communities?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've spoke to some, I'll give you an example. 2 weeks after Tim Tebow won the national championship with the University of Florida, I was with him and his entire team in the stadium talking to the team.
Wow.
So 2 weeks later, in fact, I got to take two of my sons at the time were in middle school. They got to come with and meet them and all. So they loved that. But yeah, we absolutely work with high level athletic programs. I've worked with the Houston Texans. When the Kobe Bryant case broke, a few months later, the Houston Texans had me in talking to their incoming players, their rookie class.
That's
so
wonderful.
Yeah, we absolutely do that. Now, I want to be clear about a couple of things. That's what gets the attention. Is often the news stories will be about the athlete cases, but there were way more cases that same weekend involving the general student population than that one athlete case. That's the one that often makes the news.
That's sad.
Yes.
That's very good. That's a very sad statistic.
Right. And it's reality, right? And here's how we know it's reality. When you talk to students and you say, hey, where's most sexual hookups beginning? They say bars and parties. All right. Are one of them highly intoxicated often? Yes. So wait, can they even consent? And they're like, that's questionable best if they're able to consent. So what you're describing is a common intentional manipulative move by one person to try to find someone drunk or help them get drunk or other drugs so they can get into a sexual situation. And students will tell you, yes, that happens all the time. Right. So we're talking about sexual assault being set up all the time. It's just we only hear about these few cases now and then.
So that paints a really bleak picture for, let's say, college students, and you don't have to be in college, but I'm just using that as an example. How do you help parents create the conversations at home that will raise healthy, mentally, socially, spiritually children to prevent them from going into those kinds of situations?
Yeah, great question, Susan. You empower through knowledge. One of the biggest problems that we have in our country, and it's not just our country, it's happening on some levels worldwide, is that, well, what we don't talk about, we don't have to deal with. And so we just don't talk about those things because my child would never do that. That's the mentality that a lot of parents have out there. We're just not going to talk about those things. Yeah, my kid would never do that. That's right. So we don't need to talk about that. Now, what they're forgetting is your kid might never do that, but you have no way to know whether somebody might try to do that to them next weekend or in a year or in 2 years. And by the way, how do you know your kid would never do that if you've never talked to them about how to make sexual decisions in a positive way, right? Because most kids will tell you, well, if I got any talk, it was don't get pregnant or don't have sex. That was the majority of kids. And that's not all. Some got very comprehensive discussions with their parents, but a lot did not. So what happens is one partner, when they do get curious about sexual activity, the partner who is either more proactive, more assertive, takes control because the other kid doesn't know what they're doing. So they follow the lead of the other human being. Had the parents given them knowledge, they would have been able to recognize, wait, this doesn't feel right. This isn't how it's supposed to feel. I want this to stop. They don't have any of that knowledge because parents haven't given them any knowledge about what healthy sexuality feels like, looks like. How do you help make those decisions in those moments for yourself? Having those honest conversations about what sex should be able to feel like all people go, but what about those of us who believe in abstinence until marriage? What about faith? Okay, what does faith say about sex? Well, it says not till marriage. No. That's the timeline. That's the timeline of what it says. What does it actually say about sex? Well, it's a gift from God. Oh, so it's something wonderful. What does it say about the human body? It's a gift to be treasured. It's a temple to be treasured, honored, and respected at all times. Oh, so it's something wonderful. And that's what you've taught your kids, how wonderful it is? Because if you're not talking about it, it sounds like something of shame or guilt. Or if you're telling them just don't, it sounds like it's all shame and guilt. So if you're going to say, hey, we believe not until marriage, you can share why. Because we believe it's a gift, because we believe your body is a temple, and we want that on, knowing also that this is our standard. And we know that not all kids follow their parents' standards. So I also want you to have the knowledge that if you don't follow that standard, you have the tools to make the best choices for yourselves in those situations. And so all of that becomes really important. I have groups, Susan, that hire me that are faith-based and we only can discuss abstinence. And we do. I have other groups who are like, we want the kids to have the full realm of tools in front of them. And we have those conversations.
Yeah. You know what I'm also connecting some dots on is that when these conversations take place at puberty, when they take place and when they're in high school and college, then those children, we'll just say male and female, go into the workplace with a beginning understanding of what it means to be respectful of other people, what respect means, and to know how to navigate those waters in a workplace as much as they grow older and they marry and they have children of their own. It's kind of like when you learn it at a much younger age, then it becomes a part of who you are and what your belief systems are.
Yes, you'd be amazed how many college students and military members say to me, why didn't we get this sooner? That's their awakening. Like, how did we not get this sooner? Like, we're so late in the game. Now, the good news is they can still shift, and they do. But it's sad that they didn't have it 8 years before, 4 years before, because that's where middle school is such a critical time where they want the information. Like, they're like, can we please have the conversation? And nobody's willing to have the conversation, but they want the tools. They want the skills. And so we have the opportunity to give them those skills in middle school and high school. And then you're right, it becomes more of their norm versus it now being something new to change. It's just part of the norm, which is really what we want this to be, a norm of fabric society, that we treat each other with respect.
Yes, that's beautiful. So you work with, it sounds like the children, the graduate level person, the career person, and the military. Do you have a favorite group? Is there one group that you go, oh yay, when they call you and say, can you come in? Because it's kind of like the people that you most love to work with.
What a great question, Susan. You're right. So I'm brought in by middle schools and high schools to do like school assemblies, right? You have the whole school in there for an hour. Or a university, I'm the guest speaker at night, right? That everybody comes to. Now in the military, these are training sessions that they're required to go to. So a unit or command, everybody's coming here, the whole installation, they're all arriving. So it gives you a different mindset, right? You're required to be there versus you get to choose to be there. Depends on the audience. That can play a role. University, I might be taking to all the athletes or Greek life that are required to be there, right? Just as an example. A company, everybody's expected to be there, right? Versus volunteering to be there. And so when I often start a speech, nobody wants to be in the room. Because in their mind, I'm about to be told what not to do. Yeah. This program somehow relates to consent and sexual assault, sexual violence, respect. So I'm about to hear somebody spit stats at me, laws at me, and tell me everything I'm doing wrong, right? That's what's going on in their mind. I don't do that at all, right? But that's what's going on in their mind. Sure. So I can have very hostile audiences. The joy is the first 30 seconds to a minute when they recognize, whoa, this is something different. And you see their eyes light up like, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected, right? And they start to already transform and open up. And so this answer is really hard to answer because I get to see that happen with each of those audiences just very differently. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. There can be a high school where no one wants to be in the room, but in 30 seconds, I have a volunteer on stage and everybody's laughing. And they're an amazing audience for the next 55 minutes, even though for the first minute, it looked like, oh, we're going to be pulling teeth today. So you think, all right, high schools are the best. And you go to another high school, they're really quiet. But their post-event surveys show they took away more information than you could ever imagine. They were on point with you. It's just who they are. So if you say, well, all high schools, well, not some high schools bring you a different energy than another high school does. And this is true of every audience, whether it's military or university. I love it when they bring energy. I'm energy focused. I'm known for super high energy. So I love it when they bring that back at me. So I love audiences that are willing to challenge me. That is so much fun to me. Somebody tries to heckle me, for example. I love those moments. I think it becomes some of the greatest teaching moments.
That's that, as you were talking about it, I thought, oh, he goes on an adventure with each audience. He goes in there to see what he can discover and what he can uncover for the audience. And so that seems to be your vein of gold then, because you can just be in the moment and see what you can do to help that particular group. And it's different all the time from the sounds of it.
Yeah, it is. Well, and Susan, you and I are both a member of Genius Network. And so you don't know this part about me, but in Genius Network, we talk about unique ability, and Dan Sullivan teaches unique ability. My unique ability, this is why it's so beautiful what you just said. My unique ability is to reveal aha moments that show discovery. So I actually create aha moments that reveal discoveries, right? And so exactly what you said. For me, this is an adventure.
Yeah,
and we're going to have some aha moments that then reveal the discovery that makes you go, light bulb, I want to try that. And that's the whole format. And it's the key to any good speaker nowadays. And that's the sad part. A lot of people go in, I got my stories, I got my script, I got my slides, I'm ready to go. And they forget who it was all about in the first place, the audience.
Yeah.
It wasn't about my slides. It was never about me. It's about my audience.
And what you said, I think can only be put into practice when you really know your topic.
Yes.
You know this. You've been doing it, what did you say, 30 years now?
Yep.
So, I mean, you know it so well, and you've presented to so many different types of groups that you can be flexible and you can be playful and you can be in the moment rather than just going in with a canned PowerPoint presentation that you know you have to read because you don't know what the information is necessarily, but it's in your DNA.
It is. Well, and this is the key issue, and it's a major one for anybody out there who could be listening and think, oh, I want to speak on a topic. And I get to coach entrepreneurs as a speaking coach, as you know. And so when somebody comes up to me and says, well, Mike, I hear this is a hot topic. Should I go after this topic? Immediately, I'm like, don't go anywhere near that topic because you clearly aren't an expert. You're just searching for something to make money off of versus actually talking about something you have expertise about.
Yes.
People hire you for your perspective, your expertise. That's what they hire you to speak on. So if you're going out there going, I'm going to write this speech because that's the popular topic, you have no perspective to bring. You have no expertise because you don't have any on that topic. Yes. So what I always tell people when they're going through this is forget thinking what the hot topic is. Think about what are you hot about? Like what gets you fired up? You know, it's it's a much more effective approach. And to prove it, I've been doing this work for 30 years. What's weird is 28 years ago, people said, well, that topic's in the news right now. What are you going to do when it's no longer in the news in 5 years? And then 10 years later, they'd be like, hey, that topic's back in the news, but what are you going to do when it's not in the news anymore? And then 3 years ago, they're like, your schedule must be insane because this is all over the news. My schedule was no more busy. I'll tell you why it was no more busy. I know because those who already cared about the topic and wanted subject matter experts who could really engage an audience, they were already working with us. Mm-hmm. Those who were going, we have to check the box. We got to check the box. They weren't calling me. They're going for the lowball option out there to prove they checked the box, right? So that doesn't make me any busier. When you are truly a subject matter expert, you don't worry about trends and fads. You know them, so you can talk about them, but you don't build your business based on them.
Yeah. And you work with entrepreneurs. Is it, tell us a little bit. I know that you help people with their speaking, but what is the coaching that you do overall for entrepreneurs, like so many that are listening to this right now?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that a lot of entrepreneurs, let me give you a little background. So the entrepreneurs I typically work with have already had success in life, and now they want to have more of an impact. That sums it up. They are impact-driven entrepreneurs who want to have a bigger impact. Maybe they've written a book and they want more than that now. They want to do it through their voice. So either they're already speaking in some capacity or they'd like to speak more often, and they want to be way more impactful. So a great example is one of my current clients. He sold 16 million from stages in product, from stages. And he was sick of selling from the stage. He wanted to make an impact from the stage. That's when someone comes to me. When they're saying, hey, I want to have a massive impact from the stage. Will you coach me on how to do that? And then we put them in a small group coaching program with just a few others so they can see what they don't know also, right? Because until you're in a small group, you don't know what you don't know. But when the other three are asking questions you would have never thought of in their time, then when you get to your time, you're like, oh, now I don't even need that question anymore. I want this. It just ups your game to a whole nother level. And every month it's a hot seat with me. So you'll be like, I'd be like, Susan, what do you need this month? You'd be like, I have this speech coming up. I'm worried about this. Go, Susan, show it to me. And right there, I'm coaching you. So that's what we do. I love it because it gets back to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah, you're going on another adventure.
We're going on another adventure. I'm going to be curious about what you need until you have an aha moment. That's what this is all about. And as you can tell, that's where I get my high off of. So that is what I do with entrepreneurs that are looking for that kind of impact in the world.
Yeah, that's so interesting because the people that I work with are very similar to yours in that they know their wisdom. They want to share it with the world. They want to make an impact. And then I get them at the point where they're ready to write a book and get that information out in that form. And so I help them to write the book, even if they're not a writer, they just need to be
Yep.
the author of who they are, and to write the book, to publish it, and then promote it. And so it dovetails really nicely because often, not always, but often then they want to speak about it.
That's right.
And but certainly not first time startup entrepreneurs. I'm looking for the people that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s who want to write that book that they're going to be remembered for and make that impact on the world. And everybody that I speak with here at Messengers on a Mission are a force for good. It's always, how can we make the world better? And I heard so much of what you're doing, Mike, that contributes to that. If you were going to summarize in one or two sentences what you are a messenger about, what would you say?
Oh, great question. I think it goes back to that unique ability. My message, my mission in this world, my message is to help create those aha moments for whatever that is you need in your life in that moment. While sexual assault unfortunately came into my life in a horrific way, it became my focus point on how I do that. I also now get to do it through coaching too. So it's in whatever medium I can do that. But my mission is about helping people have the discovery to live their best selves, to live that life of impact. And I think that's really at the soul what I love doing. Look, if I teach you how to have a mutually amazing relationship through the work I do, you're living a life of impact. If I'm able to help a coach be more powerful from stage in their own voice, not through my formula, not through my outline, through their own voice, they're having a bigger impact in this world. And I love impact. I think that's what we're all here to do, is to somehow impact this world.
Yes, and isn't it interesting? It always comes, I mean, without fail. I've never met someone or interviewed someone who's their what became their impact point came out of some tragedy, came out of some overcoming, came out of something that touched them so deeply that they had to find an answer for themselves about that and heal from that, and then go on a mission to go out and help other people with it, because you know how hard it was for you when you found out that your sister had been raped. For me, I lost my husband and my mother when they were both very young, and I was only 25. And that reality that we only have a finite amount of time left in life, and to live each day to the fullest, and to go out and explore and do things that always stretching, always doing more. But it came from an impact of pain. It came from an impact of pain that you experienced. But wow, talk about a force for good. You're doing it, Mike.
Well, I appreciate it, Susan. And I want to just reflect on what you just said there. That's so beautiful, is that it's our journey that we end up wanting to share with the world to help them with their journey. That was exactly what happened to me. When my sister was sexually assaulted, the part you and I didn't talk about was I started reading up on what consent was at a time when we didn't talk about it in classes or schools. And so I started reading it going, well, that would mean asking. Well, nobody ever said to ask growing up. So wait, if I'm not asking, if I don't ask, then who am I? So then I started looking around to other people. Are you asking? No, no, no. Does anybody ever ask you? No, 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 no. And that was a wake-up call. So it was my journey of, well, if I'm going to ask, then if I'm really going to do this right, I'm going to treat someone right. I'm going to give them a choice. I've got to ask, but nobody else is. So I want to take everybody on this journey, right? Yeah. That is where it began.
Absolutely. And that's where that wisdom comes from. Every single person walking on the planet has had something happen, something that they've needed to overcome and learn. The question is, do they feel that they then become a messenger? Do they want to get that out? And not everybody feels that way. They get their calling, and they just use it for their own life and their people that are in their life. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for those of us that just have that like more thing, like, oh no, I have to help more people with this, I have to get this message out more, then we are messengers. And I honor you for being here and sharing your journey with us. And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the soul that you share with this world, Susan. I love it. I love your energy. I love your presence. I love all that you do for people getting their stories out to the world through your books. It's just beautiful. And it's clearly the essence of who you are. So thank you for being you.
Yeah, thank you.